And we're live.
We're live. OMG, John.
Here we are, Karen. Another week.
I know. I've been waiting. I've been in John's place for, 30 minutes or so, and I'm just dying to hear because he just got back from a week-long advanced retreat with Dr. Joe Dispenza in Cancun, Mexico. And I've been waiting to ask him all about it so patiently, if I don't say so myself. So tell me all about it, John.
It was absolutely amazing. I had deeper insights than I've had before, and there's so many different directions I could go. I had one of my best meditations or most exciting meditations. As Dr. Joe says, there's no such thing as a bad meditation because you're always becoming more aware of what's on your mind. But one of the best meditations I had, I saw a vision of a fruit tree and pieces of fruit dropping off of it. And I was just feeling waves of ecstasy and joy with it. And I kind of interpreted it as the idea that all the hours of meditation that I had excitedly put in with a focus and intention of expanding consciousness was starting to pay off. And just huge waves of knowing and understanding that everything he's talking about and all the concepts we're talking about from Bashar and Abraham are all literally true. We're all gods in the flesh. We're all completely unlimited. And we chose to put limitation on ourselves for the fun and excitement of rediscovering ourselves and the power we have inside.
I love that.
Yes.
It reminds me, I just reheard this concept in quantum physics that we split ourselves into two parts, like the part that is the observer and the part that gets to be observed so that we can have the experience of ourselves as a separate thing. So that's what that reminds me of, just so we have a different experience, because maybe it's boring just being God and pure consciousness all the time.
Yes, that is so cool. That was one of the avenues that really came strongly to mind during the retreat, was this idea that essentially there's only self. And that's a concept that applies to all of us, given the holographic nature of the structure of existence. Everything is self. So that idea, when you're appreciating someone else or hating on someone else, the other person doesn't actually matter because they are the self, and the emotions you're putting out are only affecting you. So when it comes down to it, there literally is just self and the reflection you're getting back from what you're putting out. You may be using the image of another person or another circumstance or another experience as your excuse for the state of being you're choosing of self, but it really doesn't matter. All that matters is the state of being I'm choosing, and then perceiving it back.
Yes. It's so beautiful when you can get to that point. And I'm not saying it's easy, because there are times when I'm like, okay, this person is pissing me off, which means that I'm giving that person my power. And it also, for me, means that I'm rejecting, however they're showing up for me, whatever characteristics they're showing up as or in, they're characteristics that I, at some point in my life, made the decision to believe were unlovable or unwanted. And so I've been pushing them away. And when we push things away, we push them onto other people, which is so convenient.
And paradoxically, we're pushing it away to other people, which means we're really just pushing it into ourselves. And that idea that any type of resistance is negatively impacting myself, because if there ultimately is only self, then anytime I'm no, pushing away, I'm just pushing against myself and my own state of being. And I love your recognition of when you're interacting with others and using them as your excuse. A great example comes to mind. I made tons of friends with so many beautiful people. One of my new friends, Gabby, was telling me that right after the retreat finished, some person who was staying at the resort but not a part of the retreat came up to her and was like, I've heard a little bit about what you guys were doing in there. Can you tell me more? And his specific question that stuck out was, how many hours did you guys meditate? How many hours a day do you meditate in there? And she looked at him and she's like, I said, I'm meditating right now. We're meditating 24 hours a day. And I loved that idea so much. And it gave me what another friend calls truth bumps. I don't know if, I feel like maybe I've heard that term before, but I get waves of goosebumps or whatever as indicators of truth. And I love that I found someone else who started calling them truth bumps. But anyway, that idea that the computer that is reality is always taking commands from us 24/7, and there's not a moment except maybe when you're in the complete stillness of meditation is maybe the only time when you're not actually entering commands into the computer. But 24 hours a day, as long as you're awake and like navigating the world, the emotions you're putting out are constantly writing programs for the immediate and future, probably at every time scale. So that idea of just meditating or recognizing every minute of life is a meditation.
Yeah, and Dr. Joe explains meditation, the definition is to become familiar with. So that makes perfect sense. Like if we are conscious or awake at all in our day-to-day life, we are becoming familiar with something, hopefully the nature of reality and the nature of ourselves. So it's really interesting that she drew that parallel. I love it.
I thought that was so cool and felt, yeah, so much truth in that idea. Like the emotion is everything, and being aware of the emotion and the power of choosing differently. Like you want to feel anger sometimes, or sadness or guilt or shame, but the truth is the only way to escape those emotions and those experiences is to choose a different response. One example came to mind where I did something like quote unquote wrong maybe. If I were to like objectively look at the situation and assign polarity of right or wrong to it, I would be like, clearly I was on the wrong side. But then a higher truth comes to mind, like there's only now, and if I believe or accept, believe, and surrender, I think is the phrase Dr. Joe uses, which I love so much. So if I accept, believe, and surrender to the idea that I did something wrong and am guilty of something, I'm putting that emotion outward and projecting similar experiences to come back to me. So that idea of just like cutting it and being like, objectively, it occurred, but I'm not emotionally embracing it because that emotion has no part in the future self that I choose to be anymore.
Well, I would love to delve into that situation because did it involve another person?
It did. So I love honesty and being straightforward. So this funny circumstance played out. And one key element that I want to bring in right from the start of the situation is the idea of there only being now and always following your highest excitement right now, because your joy and excitement is pointing you in the direction of your true self. I love Bashar always says that, like, love is a great term, or like any type of elevated emotion, but he always uses the term excitement is your due north for your personal self. So I was doing some work on my computer one morning in front of the beautiful ocean after the retreat had ended, and my wife and I were texting back and forth happily. I was sharing some stuff, and I'm like, hey, I'm just gonna run to the bathroom and I'll give you a call in a couple minutes. And so I close my computer, I start heading towards the bathroom, and I bump into someone who I met. And for some reason, within like the first few seconds, they say something that just completely engages me. And this awesome conversation erupts where we're just locking in and exploring concepts. Probably 10 minutes plays out, we're totally locked in. Someone else who I met, who I knew already, it turns out they knew the person who I was talking to. And now we had this 3-person conversation going, and it was just continuing to like expand and just lock in for me. I felt like such excitement and such passion for the moment, for the topics we were discussing. And the story carries on. It wound up becoming a group of 5 people over the course of like an hour. And I just kept getting more and more locked in. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, shit, I told my wife I was gonna call her. She's probably wondering what the hell happened to me, but I am so locked in this moment to the excitement. And I saw like objectively the paradox in my head where I'm like, all right, you're confronted with a situation where you're like locked into the excitement right now. I could excuse myself. And it's not that I wasn't excited to talk to my wife, I was too, but I was like immersed in active excitement. And I was presented with, do I choose to disengage from it to go do like what I said I was gonna do, or do I trust and follow the excitement? And yeah, so probably 3 hours goes by. Like this situation just evolved and time kept stringing out, and like more circumstances and people, we wound up going to get something to eat, and then more people came in, and it was just like unbelievable how the situation was growing, and the people that were coming in and the ideas that were coming in, and my excitement was growing. So after 3 hours, I call my wife and I'm like, listen, I wanna like say I'm so sorry, but then I'm engaging with an emotion of right or wrong. Like this is what happened. And we wound up having the most phenomenal conversation. I'm the most blessed guy ever on earth to have a wife who's interested in exploring consciousness in the same way I am and playing the same game of ascending consciousness. So we had this really cool conversation where I just laid it all out for her. And again, like I was saying earlier, I told her, listen, if I was going to go into polarity and assign right wrong to this situation, I would say clearly I'm the one in the wrong, but here's like what I was confronted with. And it's kind of cool to be able to dissect a circumstance and the consciousness of a situation with the other person who's involved in it to get different concepts. And my wife was so beautifully expressing her perspective where she's like, actually, it was presenting me with an opportunity to also do the work at the same time. Because she's like, at first I wanted to be worried, like under the fearful, but then she's like, I know the only thing to fear is fear itself. Fearful energy is indicating I'm flowing a future towards me that I'm not going to prefer. So she was processing it on her end, and it was kind of this weird, like, beautiful moment that came of it where we both like understood each other's perspectives and what we were each going through, and like saw the potential for the old program and old interpretation that we were always operating under to play out, and then explaining how we each arrived at our conclusions, which was expansion for both of us.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool. And my first thing that comes up for me is she's been to a retreat. Like, you know what it's like. Like, that happens all the time. Like,
Yes.
you have an intention of doing something. Like, for me, it's like calling my daughter, for example. And I tell my daughter ahead of time, I'm like, I will do my best to call you at this time. I'm not going to guarantee it, because you never know when you're going to get into one of these conversations that's so expansive and so nurturing to the soul, you know, and so I tell her that, and she's like, okay. But
Yeah.
I was dating somebody who was at a Dr. Joe retreat, and he insisted, he's like, no, I want to talk to you every day. And I'm like, I don't want to put that expectation on you. Like, I don't need to talk to you every day. I want you to be fully immersed and I don't want to be an obligation. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because for me, if I am obligated to call somebody every single day, I will not feel good about that. Like, it will build up some kind of like a have to. Like, I have to do this, and not a I want to, I'm excited to.
Yeah.
And I never want to be that for anybody. I never want to be a have to.
That's so beautiful. Freedom, or at least in the game I'm playing, freedom is my highest truth. And I'm seeing the other people who are playing the same game of expansion with me also all seem to hold freedom as one of like the core elements of self. So yeah, that was the other idea that was coming to mind. So my wife and I ultimately arrived at this definition of our relationship where we saw the paradox, like we're completely free yet partnered simultaneously. And this phrase came to mind, partners in freedom, which seems almost paradoxical, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're like partnering together to move towards the intention and the state of being of complete like freedom and unconditional support and expansion. And I love that idea, and I feel so lucky and excited to have that idea of a relationship in my reality.
And how fun to have somebody who's like on that journey with you, that you can practice with and have these conversations where you're both growing and evolving toward that freedom piece, or who you're becoming. Like, what a freaking gift is that?
It's a total gift. Thanks for sharing in my gift. So one other thing that I noticed a lot during this conversation, if we're carrying on with this example, this conversation with 5 people that kept growing and having more elements to it, was I was really recognizing the feeling of the moment. Just being surrounded by these people, I guess they were my permission slip to feeling such expansion and joy and excitement. And I almost at several moments was kind of looking around, and I was like, I don't even care what words we're using here or even what we're talking about, even though the topic and the words were exciting. But it was literally just the presence of the other people who were in their state of being and in their truth and immersed in the same game that I was, that was creating this moment of complete bliss. And for the following day or two that I was there, I decided to extend my stay another day or two because it felt so good after that. I was really zeroing in on feeling the emotion of the person I was with, even more so than the content of the discussion. And it's an idea that I've heard Abraham Hicks express several times, where she's like, when you're going into an interaction with someone, set the intention for the emotional cadence and the emotional feeling of the encounter rather than the words. She's like, if you just focus on the emotion you prefer to experience during the interaction, you'll see that the content and topics you discuss will almost be irrelevant, but everything's going to feed towards that emotion. And I was finding that to be the case in presetting the intention. And it's a really cool way to approach reality and really counter to how I've explored reality before, thinking, I have this topic in mind, we have to discuss it, and we have to determine who's right or wrong and how to shift it or whatever. And now I realize if the feeling's all I'm going for, who really cares what the F the topic is and what we're doing with it, as long as everyone's feeling amazing.
That's amazing. And that reminds me too of, I think my second week-long retreat with Dr. Joe, one thing that really like hammered into me and like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this, is setting an intention before meditations. Like I was meditating every single day. I didn't miss a day for over a year. And I never once set an intention before that one. I'm like, oh, I missed that little piece. And then how much more powerful it is when you have an intention. You're not just going through the motions. Like you know what your target is. It's so much easier to hit a target when you actually delineate what it is. And I can see how that plays out in conversations too. And even in coaching, I set an intention before the session. And then as they tell me what's going on, I set a more specific intention. Like, okay, this is what I'm responsible for causing in them.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Dr. Joe was talking more at this retreat. So I should preface by saying every time I go to a retreat or listen to his things, I hear more content and ideas than I previously recognized before. And I'm seeing that as a common theme among all the channels and sources that give me truth bumps, is that idea that even if I listen to the exact same recording again, I'll be like, I didn't hear them say that last time. And it's such a powerful idea within it. So I keep hearing more and more things. But one thing I really heard very clearly during this retreat was the idea of a think box and a play box. And his idea that every time you're going to start a meditation, you go in your think box first, which is essentially setting the intention. And the intention could simply be, my emotions are like all over the place, and I know they are, and my intention is simply to calm my mind in the nothingness to reach a neutral state and then tip over the neutral scale all the way to, if I'm already exhilarated going into a meditation like I was this week, I started getting really specific with intentions ahead of time in my think box. But it's really cool because when you're actually in the meditation, you know exactly where you're going when you hit the neutral point, or maybe the neutral point is simply your end product, but whatever it is, you know the trajectory. So
yes,
great
and
idea.
Dr. Joe is really big. Dr. Joe, let me enunciate that, is really big on the think box. And after every meditation, he'll say, turn to the person next to you, tell them what you did really, really well, and tell them what you're going to bring next time. So you're figuring it out in your think box, which is not your play box. Your play box is your meditation, which I love that, because a lot of people that don't do the work, they think of meditation as work, and it's really play. It's where you're exploring your state of consciousness, like whatever you want to experience, you can experience in meditation. And I freaking love that.
Yeah.
So fun.
This is bringing to mind a concept that I'm very curious to hear your perspective on. So my understanding of meditation has kind of evolved, but the point I'm at right now, or my greatest understanding, is in order to create, you must be in a neutral point or a neutral state. Every experience or emotion or anything, as we've discussed before, exists on this polarity scale with a neutral point in the middle where you're kind of indifferent to it going either way. You see both ends of the stick as equally real, equally valid, equally selectable experiences, but it's from the state in the center where you have no real emotion and a recognition that everything's valid, that you can pick the one that just excites you more because your true self is guiding you. And the understanding I'm at now is most meditations start with nothingness or neutralness, expanding your focus beyond anything known in your reality to hit the neutral point. And then frequently when I hit the neutral point, thoughts and emotions naturally start coming on that feel really blissful. Ideas that I really like come to mind, emotions that I really like come to mind. And I've discovered during this retreat, I can let them kind of spin each other up. I'll get a thought of a cute puppy and I'll be like, oh, that's so cute. And it'll raise my emotion. And then I'll get a next thought of a delicious pizza and I'll be like, oh, fuck yeah. And then it'll raise the next thought of like being on a beach. And I discover every time like the emotion raises a higher image, raises another emotion. And Dr. Joe, I heard several times, which again, I hadn't heard him before, where he's like, it's a love affair with your brain. You're making love to your brain. It's a love affair with your brain. And then I was like, oh, the love is the heart, is the emotion, and the brain is like the thought or the image I'm getting. And they're going back and forth because they're like synchronizing where the emotion and the thought are matching up. Because a lot of times you're angry and you'll be like, positive thinking, I'm not angry. And you're still, the emotion and the thought like aren't lined up, so it's incoherent. But when you have like the coherent image with the coherent emotion, they like feed each other and create like a feedback loop. So I was curious, your perspective, if you use the neutral point as your initial stop on the way to creating like this feedback loop of emotions and thoughts, or what your meditation process is.
It's really interesting because I didn't think of it that way. I've been trained that way by Dr. Joe to become nothing, nobody, nowhere, no time, no place, no thing.
Yes.
And I've started practicing more recently with just silent meditations, which I hadn't done a lot with until pretty recently. I usually used music because I was believing certain stories like, oh, I need music to calm my mind down or to focus me. But the silence has been so blissful for me.
I love that.
And it's interesting because my mind now will calm down. It becomes void much more quickly. I believe in the silence.
Yes.
And I've trained myself to listen to the sounds in the room. Now listen to the sounds outside the room. Listen to the sounds outside. And then, maybe I focus on my breathing while listening to the sounds. And it's just interesting. And then my mind just all of a sudden, it just goes, there's a letdown where it becomes that neutral point, like you're saying, where it becomes void. And then thoughts will start to come in, and I'm more at choice then. Like, do I want to follow this thought, or do I want to let it pass by? So I'm still not resisting because I am in that neutral space.
Yeah.
But it's really fascinating. Like, just my advice, if you are new to meditation, or if you're seasoned, like, I was doing Dr. Joe meditations for many years before I started doing silent meditations. And because I have such a base of the Dr. Joe stuff, I can hear his voice in my head all the time.
You too?
If I choose to. So I kind of know the process. And so, but my advice is play with different things and see, what the benefits are of each, because each one has its own little juicy nuggets for you. It's a matter of trying things out. And it's another way that I use my intuition. If I tap in, I'm like, okay, my intention today is to connect to the frequency of abundance. What would best serve me to do that today, right now in this moment? Not yesterday, not next week, but in this moment. So maybe it's the hour-long synchronizing my energy to abundance. Maybe it's 15 minutes of silence. Maybe it's something in between. But it's trusting that there is a part of me that knows what is best for me. And I love that freedom, back to freedom, to actually play and explore and not be doing it rotely out of habit or have to. Again, not a have to.
Yeah, that's such a beautiful idea. I love you expressing that idea to viewers, to like play around and like trust. So many systems are presented as like very rigid systems of meditation, and I think that's such a beautiful offering that like resonates deeply in my heart. Like allowance is love, play is love, receptivity to other perspectives is love. So that resonates deeply. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And I, interestingly enough, have been playing around with long periods of silence too. Usually I'll set a timer for 30 minutes if I'm gonna just sit completely in silence, but I've been having that impulse a lot lately, just to completely sit in silence and like feel just nothingness, and it becomes like blissful pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden just breathing, you can be like, oh, breathing is so good. I had moments of Dr. Joe, usually after the long void periods of meditation, where I would go outside and just breathe and be like, oh my God, it's like so good. And like I had visions or like understandings or knowings that like bliss is all around us every second. It's just like a fog of thought which obscures the perfection and bliss that's always completely surrounding us. I had several episodes of like seeing it. It's just like waves of ecstasy and laughter and joy in realizing there's like nothing to fear. There's nothing to do. I mean, again, these are all like just my chosen truths. If fear is an exciting reality for you, choose fear. You'll get a real experience that's fearful back. Like everything is valid is the ultimate truth. There's so much love around us. You can say, I'm excited for fear, and say, I fear that snake. And the snake will give you a real fearful experience because it's pure love. It says, no problem, bro. I love you to death. You want me to be fearful? I'll be fearful. Like, but the highest truth potentially is that fear experience is real because it's love, because there's nothing but love.
That's so funny. I was just thinking about creating your own contrast. If you ever find yourself in a position where you're not grateful for anything, have your best friend hold your head underwater for like just a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and then see how grateful you feel for air.
That's awesome. Is that one of your recommended meditation processes? Having a challenging day. That is actually a really cool idea though. And it's that idea that like, hunger, if you will, as a general idea is actually like a very beneficial and great thing. It like incites appreciation and excitement for something that you'd consider a normal baseline, like air, right? Mm-hmm. Go without air for a little while and you'll realize how much you damn appreciate air. Go without like water for a little while and you'll really appreciate water. I was listening to an interview with on YouTube with Schwarzenegger from I don't know how many years ago, and they were talking actually about like having very satisfying experiences, and Schwarzenegger was saying, I like being hungry. I like the feeling of hunger because it's like where my growth is and it's where I see my expansion is. So he's like, I don't want a lot of stuff to come too fast. I like want to build the hunger because it's what like drives it. And if you consider consciousness within the context of expansion, like hunger is the driving force for expansion. You see like a new idea or a new state of being or a new experience that is exciting, and you thrust towards it because of the hunger for it.
Ooh, yeah, that's so delicious. I love it all.
Yes. Where do we go from here?
You shouldn't say that. I'm going to do some Guns N' Roses again.
Where do we go?
Where do we go now? Little musical interlude. Gosh, there's so many good things in all of that.
I found huge excitement in the walking meditations, Dr. Joe's walking meditations. We did several of them on the beach. And there's one of them, I think it's Walking Meditation 6. I don't know if it's one, that's your favorite, right?
Usually 11, but
11.
I did 6 during the retreat.
I think it's only accessible during retreats. I don't think it's for sale yet, or I could be confused. It was
It's
on the
probably
Making Your
11.
Mind
Is it?
Matter one. So basically the line in it, which I love so much, he kind of like, you start in nothing and he builds you up. And as you're walking, like it has this great pumped up music, but it returns to the idea of now and the chosen state of being now. And he throws out several of these phrases in a row where he's like, is joy in your future? Then feel it now. And he's like, is excitement in your future? Then feel it now. And it's like hammering home and really drilling in the recognition that there's only now in the state of being that I choose now. And if I'm waiting for something outside me to give me the emotions, that movie or the play Waiting for Godot, you're waiting for something that's not going to come forever because you have to be it in order to see it first. Yes. So I was writing down some lines that were coming to mind, and I was almost about to do my own recording earlier today, and I might later today, where I make my own meditation with my own phrases. Like, is abundance in your future? Then feel it now, be it now. You know, you want to burn bright as a bright light for everyone, then burn right now. It's always right now. Ooh, truth bumps.
Yes, that's all there is.
That's all there is.
That's one of the reasons I love walking meditation so much, is because you are embodying those states now.
Yes.
And And for me, I used to meditate and then I would go back to my life and be an asshole. Again, like, 20 minutes after finishing a meditation, I could be as big of an asshole as I was before. And I'm like, well, this isn't working. What's the point, right?
Yes.
But walking meditations for me is like, especially the Dr. Joe ones, those are the only ones I've done. I shouldn't say especially. He gets you in a state exactly like that, like feel abundance now, like be it, walk as it.
Yes.
Like, because it is the truth of who you are. And then I want to bring up another point, which is there is no time. And yet, for me as a coordinator of some of these walking meditations, I love to do them when there are these retreats going on. And I set the intention for the group out loud to all of them to tune into that energy, that frequency of however many people. How many were there?
Over 2,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. So I said, like, I didn't know. I said 1,800 people that are raising their frequency. They've been overcoming themselves all week and raising their frequency. You can tune into that anytime you choose. And for me, it's easier to remember when there's one going on. So my next evolution is to tune into that frequency every time I meditate. Tune into the frequency of that room on day 6 or day 7. I like day 6. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, that's such a powerful idea, right? And like you're saying,
Yes.
everything is always accessible in every moment. If there's only now, then every now has the same potential for everything as any others. So you can tune into anything, past, present, future, the idea of past, present, future at any moment. When we did the coherence healing, I guess, again, I heard it really deeply this time. I think he says it every time or does it every time, that at least for the final coherence healing on day 7, he asked several of the remote coherence healing groups to tune in and direct their intention towards the room overall. And like, wow, did I feel it. We walked into the room and just like sat down and I was feeling, I was feeling waves of truth bumps coming over me, just sitting down, walking into the room, just feeling how cool it is that 2,000 people in the room and however many people outside the room are all placing their intention in this space with the broader sense of healing or wellness for everyone in it. It's such like a beautiful idea and such an exciting idea.
It is.
And it's extra sweet because I played so many years in like sadness and separation and illness. So like, I like feel all the hunger of those years coming to satiation. Is that the word? I'm satiated.
Yes.
Very satiated and like extra delicious. And that's the paradox I see when people are really in challenging situations, especially maybe from early in life. I could see as a consciousness, as an invincible, indestructible consciousness being like, hey, the deeper in the hole, in the darkness I start off my experience, the more distance I have to travel, and like the more hunger I have, and paradoxically, like the more joy potential exists, and the more like satisfaction you can generate in the realization I'm God and I can experience anything I prefer.
Well, that makes sense. And I was just talking about this the other day. It's like if you start at the bottom, there's so much room for growth and expansion.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go back to the coherence healing. I'm
Yes.
so glad he told you guys.
Yeah.
So I was one of those people.
Yeah, you're in one of the groups?
I was, yes. So I had the intention. So first thing, like, we were there 30 minutes. So when the Heelys were in the room, we were there.
Okay.
Like, energetically, we were there before you were in the room.
Yeah.
So for me, like, I see us lining the whole perimeter of the room and casting this net of loving energy over top of that room. And then once the healers walked in and got settled, I set the intention to connect with you.
Me specifically?
With you specifically because I knew you were there. But then I'm like, I kind of pulled back. I'm like, I don't know if he's supposed to know I'm here. Because we signed an NDA. We're not allowed to tell you in advance. We're not allowed to tell you afterward unless we know, like he's told you.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, so I set the intention to connect with you. And then I'm like, I was behind you. I was behind you. And I don't know if you felt it, anything behind you.
Definitely.
But I was behind you. Like I had my hands on, like, out on your back and your hands were out. So it was like.
That is so cool. And I sign agreement forever going forward. If you ever wish to come around me with positive intention or any intention that's your truth, I welcome it. Absolutely. Or anyone. I love that. That's really cool. Yeah, maybe it was you. I like sat right down to start and I was like feeling the waves going up my back already. And I was like, oh, this room is on fire. And I just saw like the roof like exploding off of it. Just like so much like excitement in the room for choosing elevated emotions.
Oh, it was, man, that was a high frequency room, man. Woo! I
Yeah,
can feel it.
yeah.
I can tap into it right now, that
Yeah.
energy.
Oh,
And that's the other thing, like he had no idea, but he felt the support. And that's the beauty of intention and of energy, because when you set an intention to connect with someone energetically, it knows no time and no bounds. It is immediate.
Yeah.
Immediate. So people will feel it when you connect with them in love. And we do this in our healing group a lot. Like people will put in requests like, oh, I have my daughter's sick. And like immediately people start sending energy and people heal like that without an actual session, but just people sending energy and love and setting that intention. It's so powerful, and I invite you to do it. And you've all had an experience of this where you've been thinking, gosh, I really should call this person, and then they call you out of nowhere. So we've all had that intention of connecting energetically with others. That experience, not the intention, but I'm saying set the intention and see what happens, because it's beautiful. And you can do it with people that you love, people that are challenging for you. That's, for me, that's an edge. That's a growth area. So play with it.
yeah, beautiful.
Always play.
And coming back to, I'm hearing our core idea that we started with, the idea that there's essentially only self for each of us. So if you're putting a beautiful intention out towards someone else, truly at the heart of the matter, you're benefiting yourself. And then since it's a hologram, you're offering that frequency to someone else for them to say, yes, I choose that now as my truth. And then what was probably happening between the two of us, we both, as sovereign, powerful gods, had the same intention. And then it was coming together to create like the coherent bliss that I was feeling because it was amplified with someone else. And paradoxically, we were both benefiting ourselves and each other because we were both like choosing to play the same game. And maybe that's where the idea of coherence really builds. You get two or more people who are playing the same game together. That's like a huge element I'm seeing in reality. Just always sitting with the idea all truths are true and everyone here is a sovereign God pursuing their own game. So there's gotta be, for the sake of having free will and experience, there's gotta be a million trillion infinite games going on here. So it's just really fun to find other people who are playing the same game I am. For a bunch of years in the past, I was trying to get like other people to join my game, but that's not their soul's intention or their excitement is to play my same game. So it's really cool now to be surrounded by people who are playing this same game of ascending consciousness and then feel the emotions that come of it. I've felt more elevated emotions in the last week than I felt in my entire life. And the height of the elevated emotion just keeps like getting higher and higher. And it's cool, it'll dip. Even during the retreat, there were like periods of a couple hours where it would dip down and I'd be like, all right, no big deal. Like I'm not gonna beat myself up, but it's cool to recognize when I'm not in a state to recognize I can do something about this. And the biggest thing is just accepting it. Okay, like it's fine, we move around. I'm here now. I set my intention that I'm going back up and not gonna beat myself up to it. And before I know it, especially with meditating for so long, it's so easy to get in that neutral point that then you can choose it and all of a sudden I'd find myself up even higher. And I guess it's, maybe that's the bliss of reality is that it is a wave. So there's gotta be troughs for there to be peaks. Otherwise it would just be like indiscernible leveling. So
yes. Yeah. For some reason, that's reminding me. I used to have this yoga instructor who was older, and she was so wise and grounded. And I've mentioned this before, but I'm going to mention it again because it's applicable. When we were at the end of class, and it was time for Savasana, the rest, the dead body pose, corpse pose, she would say, remember, the most relaxed you ever were in Savasana, start there. And what if you started every meditation, remember the most relaxed or the most joyful, start there. And it's a choice. And you can train yourself to be in that state. And you know, if you need physical anchors, you can create them. Neurolinguistic programming uses anchors. So one would be like a physical anchor, like, you know, some people will do like some kind of mudra, something with their hands.
Yeah.
If you touch any point on your body, that could be a reminder of any state you want to re-experience and to remind yourself of.
Beautiful.
But incorporating any of the senses, like what scent reminds you of bliss, or what visual, what wild animal, what taste. I mean, it could be anything.
Yeah.
What saying, so you're stimulating the auditory sense.
That's beautiful.
Like it could be like a fuck yeah, like to represent like your most excited state.
Yes.
And when you anchor that in, every time you feel that state, you can choose what are your most powerful anchors. And then when you're not feeling it and you want to, those anchors are already present for you. And you can just activate them and you're like, oh shit, there it is.
That's beautiful. And I was really noticing too during this retreat, keying in, almost every meditation ends with Dr. Joe saying, and remember this feeling, remember. So you you form the neurological pathway to the emotion. And that seems to be all the game of reality or ascension really is. It's constantly embracing and choosing and surrendering to the elevated emotion. You keep building a bigger and bigger and fatter highway in your neurological pathways to the emotion of joy. And the fatter it gets, the bigger the bundle of joy gets. And it just, pretty soon those other emotions start withering away. Not because they're invalid, they're perfectly valid. It's just not the chosen preference. And just like you practice being sad, you practice being happy and get that experience back. But I love that idea of picking like an anchoring idea or scent. As you were speaking, I was thinking of the meditations. In the past, like pizza would come to mind after I was in the void, and I'd be like, that's nonsense. I'm like disassociating. But then I like gave the realization to myself, dude, you love pizza. It's fucking delicious. One loaded with pepperoni. And like myself talks to myself sometimes, and it'll say like, you came here for the experience of physical reality, and pizza is something you chose to love. So I'm giving you that as a symbol, as an excuse to start to feel good. So embrace the feeling of it. And then when I embrace the feeling of it, you get the next hit of an image where I'm like a puppy, like I love puppies. I love cuddling with them. They lick my ear and walk on my face. Like it just incites so much joy. So they're just like symbols of an excuse to feel the emotion. But ultimately, at the end of the day, in like physical reality, everything is perceived with a sense. So we're progressing through new experiences, but they're going to be built upon from emotions that you chose during past experiences. I don't know if that makes sense, but we're like building a structure. So pizza makes me feel good. It opens a doorway for like higher emotion. It's now like the new baseline that I can jump off to and then have an experience that's even more elevated, pursued potentially.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you say that now, I'm remembering one of our intentions when we're meditating is to become pure consciousness. And when you're pure consciousness, you don't have any senses. You have no senses. You have a knowing.
Right.
He'll say sense it, but it's not using your senses. It's just a knowing. So this is not for that. This is not when you're pure consciousness.
Right.
But it's perhaps a doorway.
Yes.
Or a reminder of, you know, when you're in 3G reality, how to trigger certain states on command. So it's using your body and your subconscious mind together to create whatever experience that you prefer.
That's beautiful. Yeah, and it brings to mind the idea that like I don't know everything, and I don't know if I like ever will know everything. Like this is a constant expansion, and
you don't know if you will ever know everything. Seriously, you really don't know that?
Yeah.
Here, wait. Come back to reality.
Yeah.
I'm slapping him if you're listening to this. Like, of course you won't know everything.
Yeah, that's like the game. Like the best understanding I have is going to continue to evolve forever, and being open to whatever newness that contains, right?
Well, you wouldn't need to be here in a body if you knew everything. Like, even if you're the smartest person in the room, find a new room. Like, you get to grow and expand all the time, or you have no reason to be here in a physical body anymore.
Yeah, I love that idea. That's actually an idea I sit with too. It seems that some people who meditated for like years, most of them are like Eastern figures, I guess, they reach like a state of consciousness where they're just completely no longer playing a game of human in like 3D reality. And I actually sit with myself sometimes and be like, do we want to go so far that we're no longer playing the game? And a part of me is like, I'm exhilarated to like play the game of human with full consciousness that I'm the creator of it. Like imagine the exhilaration of that. I'm not ready to check consciousness to another level until I've like milked everything out of this level. And I guess actually there's probably no end to how much you could milk out of physical reality, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and for me, it's really fun to have a body. It's super fun. I mean,
is.
not always when I'm in hot yoga, but it's fun afterward.
Yeah.
And if you are somebody who experiences pain, for example, there's an edge for you, right? That I know a lot of people that were in a ton of pain. You were probably one of them. And then you transformed it. So, and I've been there too. I was in so much pain, I was suicidal for a while. And I'm now in no pain. I almost never have pain. And I'm, 55.
Is it it's emotional pain you're referencing or physical pain?
No, physical pain.
Oh, physical pain.
Yeah, from a car accident.
Huh.
Yeah.
Do you almost see the two as one and the same? Perhaps like eventually emotional pain becomes physical pain? I've sat with that idea like physical pain is always stemmed ultimately from emotional pain or like state of being pain. Do you like have a perspective on that?
Well, I think they are definitely related. And, in my case, yeah, I was in a car accident. So I believe if there's some type of trauma, physical trauma, there can be pain that isn't necessarily related to the emotions of it.
Yeah.
But I think long-term chronic pain almost always has an underlying emotional component. And underneath that, I believe that it's almost always unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is why I am doing that work now.
Yes. The data presented at the week-long retreat is coming to mind. The researchers at UC San Diego who are collecting all sorts of data points during different like week-longs and retreats. And one of the most fascinating studies was pertaining to PTSD or sufferers of PTSD and meditation. And I think a lot of the studies are actually published on Dr. Joe's website where you can take a look at it, but it's absolutely phenomenal. I think the word is efficacy, which is basically like effectiveness of the treatment, whether it's like a pill or meditation or whatever it is. And it seems to be several times the effectiveness meditation over any type of pill or anything. And they were looking at different brain scans and parts of the brain associated with different functions. And one of the parts of the brain was the part that seems to like constantly run memories in the background, almost like a computer. It's like the processor that never stops. It's always like consuming energy primarily in past experiences. And what seems to happen during meditation is that section of the brain like cools completely off to almost no energy, which almost represents like a hard rebooting, like a computer of the brain to like clear out all the cache of memory being stored there. And it gives you like, for a certain period of time, a fresh start to create from. And it makes like so much sense. It makes so much sense logically, but it makes so much sense actually like physically in terms of elements of the brain and how things are happening. So
Yeah.
the data coming out is just gonna revolutionize the world.
I know.
Just absolutely revolutionize it. They're peer-reviewed research articles using the exact same testing standards as any other medication or any other professional medical treatment, and the results are absolutely unbelievable, but totally believable.
Yeah, to us because
To us.
we've experienced it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really fascinating. I love that, the research is showing that this works. And, if you know how trauma works at all, if you are in a triggered response, like somebody with PTSD, they're having emotions, right? They're experiencing emotions. The only purpose of an emotion is to get somebody to take action. The problem with the way the subconscious mind works is it wants you to take action on something that happened 20 years ago. It's like, take action, take action. So when we get triggered, you either think the event is happening right now, it just happened or it's just about to happen. So think about all those states. You have to be in this heightened arousal. And when you're in that state, your body will not go into rest and repair. It cannot. If it thinks you're going to be hit by a bomb any second, or it just went off and your best friend's dead, you're not going to say, oh, I think I'll go take a nap and relax. It's just not going to happen. So when we're able to go in and like, turn that part of the brain off, or like in the work I do, it's like we clear the trauma. It gets stuck in the brain like glops, and we break it into smaller pieces so it can flow through like a sieve. And then it doesn't affect you anymore. And then you can go into maintenance and repair, which means that everything works better.
That's beautiful.
Inflammation goes away, like everything works better.
Yeah. Yeah, that core idea, which we're also familiar with, is so cool. The idea that the body doesn't know the difference between an experience and a thought of an experience when you're truly immersed in it. The signals and the hormones that are being produced and circulated throughout your body are identical whether you're purely imagining it with the emotion or actually experiencing it. And I really leaned into it and played around with that a lot. And yeah, the bliss like you can get just sitting in a room with nothing, like a convention center room that just has black walls, is insane. Yeah. Like there's no, I guess outside there is a beautiful beach or whatever, but at the time during the meditations, there's like just nothing, and you can generate such amazing emotions from that and give your body a taste of another version of yourself, which is always available.
So fun.
Yeah.
I love it all.
Yes.
Well, thanks for sharing like about the retreat. I love that energy coming off of a retreat, in the retreat. And I invite everybody really tap into any frequency you want, especially for me, like the group energy.
Yeah.
It's so powerful. Even we do these group meditations with only like 15, 20 people, but we still have so much more energy together as a group than we would individually. At least that's my experience.
Yes, mine too.
But as an individual, you have the ability to tap into the frequency of any group. So I'm on a healing team, an authorized healing team with Dr. Joe. And I used this when I was hosting a couple healing sessions last week, like tap into the energy of that room, of the entire community of Dr. Joe students. So not just the people that were in Cancun, but tap into the frequency of the entire community. So by this time, it's probably hundreds of thousands of people. And our healing sessions, when I did that, were like through the roof. Everyone's like, because you're tapping into something that's greater than you believe you have access to. But what the paradox is, you always have access to it. It's just a matter of recognizing it and playing. Choosing to play, and you know I like to play.
Yes. Beautiful. Yeah, you're truly never alone. There's always other consciousness out there exploring the same concepts with you. Not to mention, if you go to another perspective, the rest of the world literally is you. So you're never alone. You're always surrounded by yourself, and whatever you say yourself is what you are.
I love it.
What the world is.
Oh, this is so good, John.
What sort of hand signal do we finish with? How about the shaka? Yes. Bye. Take care, everyone.